guys, it's the Warhipster here, coming at you with another Lumineth Realm-lords painting tutorial, and today we're painting the Vanari Dawnriders. Now, a few bits of business just before we begin. What we've done is we've actually left the shield off for now, because there's loads of detail under here that we want to get at, and particularly on this guy, when the shield's on, you see that it covers up so much of this area, and just to make life a little bit easier for ourselves, we've just left it off for now. We've also primed this guy in Wraithbone because we want a nice warm colour. And well, without further ado, it's time to get started. So the colour that we've made first and foremost, and we're going to be working on the horse, is we've made a roughly 1-to-1 mix of contrast medium and Gore Grunta Fur. And the reason for this is because we want a nice flow with the paint across the horse's muscles. Now it's quite easy to paint the horse, because what we want to do is we want to take it in sections. So we basically want to pick an area to start. So I'm actually going to start here on this back leg here, and I want to make sure that I get right up underneath here. And all I want to do is I want to make contact with the model right in those recesses and just pull this colour all the way down like this, just making sure that I'm filling in all of that muscle area. And as you can see, because of that contrast medium, we've actually got a lot softer colour, which is exactly what we want, because we don't want the horse to be like super dark brown. We want the contrast to do most of the work for us here, so that any highlights that we apply can just kind of be a spot highlight, rather than kind of having to do softer highlights followed by harder highlights, if you see what I mean. Whereas kind of if we made the mix too runny, we'd end up having to layer it up, because we wouldn't have the kind of colour saturation that we're after. So what we want to do is we just want to keep going around like this, and we're just picking at it an area at a time, like I'm doing here. And with that done, we've got some really nice horse fur flesh type thing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to paint in the horse's hair, and the colour we're going to be using for this is Aggaros Dunes. And what we want to do is we just want to very carefully paint this in, not using tons at a time. Like this. We want to do this on his tail hair, as well as on his mane. And with that Aggaros Dunes applied, what we now want to do is we're going to use some Cygor Brown. And this is going to be for all the strapping around the horse. Don't worry too much about doing the rider. We just want to make sure that we've got the horse done, and then we'll paint our way up the model. So we want to get this Cygor Brown all over the strapping around his tail, around his bridle, and the saddle strap way underneath there. And in addition to all that strapping, we're going to use some Cygor Brown again, and this is going to be just for the hooves, as we want these to be nice and dark. Just being careful around that fur that we've painted in. And with that Cygor Brown applied to all the strapping and to his hooves, what we're now going to do is we're going to use some thinned down Corax White, and we're going to use this to basically colour in all these armour panels, because we want them to be white rather than Wraithbone. Just want to get a good coverage of this all over like this. We want to do it across the horse panels. You can do the rider if you want to. I suspect I probably will, because I thinned down quite a lot of Corax White here. But you don't have to do the rider at this point, because, you know, we're not focusing on him. And you know, if we make a mistake whilst painting the horse that kind of gets a big splodge on him, we'll only have to correct it again later, which isn't a problem. But you know, it's entirely up to you what you do here. And with that Corax White applied, just before we go and do any of those metallics around the edging on that armor plating, what we're going to do is we're going to work on the fabric hanging off the horse. Now this excludes this large piece in the middle because that's going to be blue. But what we want to do is we want to get that nice soft cream on each of these other parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Wyldwood mix. And we're not going to use loads of this at once. We're just going to use a small amount on our brush. And what we want to do is we want to make contact with the model up the top by the recess and pull this Wyldwood mix down, giving us a nice kind of off brown, or kind of off bone, I guess, like that. Same again on this side, pulling it down. Pulling it down like this. And we want this to be kind of, well, we want this to be in line with the rest of the Lumineth Realm-lords tutorials that we've done. So as you can see, it's just like, it's a really subtle colour to add, but it is perfect for what we're trying to do. The reason we're not, as I've said before, the reason we're not using Skeleton Horde is Skeleton Horde is a little too yellow, and we don't want it to be like an out and out yellow. We just want this kind of really soft muted brown. And with that done, what we're now going to do, just before we do any highlights, don't worry, we're going to do all of those at once, is we're going to use some thinned down Iron Hand steel. We want to use this on all of that scale mail hanging off of the armour on the horse. Like so. And next up with that Iron Hand steel apply, what we want to do is we want to take some thinned down Retributor Armour. I'm going to use this for all of the warm gold details. So this includes areas like the horse's bit and the little metal bit here on the bridle. Like this. We also want to use this Retributor Armour on the stirrup. And we want to use this Retributor Armour on the sigils on the armour. And with all of that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to create a roughly 2 part Stormhost Silver to 1 part Retributor Armour mix. And we're going to use this to paint in all of the trim on the armour on the horse. And with that done, we're now going to focus on this middle piece of fabric going down the middle of the horse. So the first colour that we're going to be using is Space Wolves Grey. This is because we want this to be that really nice dark blue. And the Space Wolves Grey provides us with our first coat, our pre-shade. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to use some Akhelian Green. And we're going to use this in 2 different ways. So, the Akhelian Green first, we want to use it across all of these tassels, like this, hanging from the horse. just want to make sure that we get the little loop as well, like that. You want to go all the way around. Like that. We want to do that on all of those tassels. But equally, we want to use this Akhelian Green as a layer over the top of that Space Wolves Grey. Just want to make contact once again. We just want to use big broad brush strokes to get a nice smooth finish of this Akhelian Green all over that cloth. And with that Akhelian Green applied, what we now want to do is we want to take some Ultramarines Blue. And we want to use this over the top of that Akhelian Green. But what we also want to do, where possible, is just avoid any of the edges. And this is a perfect example just down here. I'm just going to turn the model over just for a second, because what I want to do is I want to get this Ultramarines Blue on, but I want to leave that Akhelian Green edge shining through. So I just want to take the Ultramarines Blue like this, like that. Just as you can see, that Akhelian Green is still there on the edge, but not on the flat. So this establishes our really lovely blue tone. And we're just doing this over the top of the large cloth. We're not doing this on the tassels as well. And with that done, it's time to add some shade to the miniatures. And the first colour we're going to use is some Gryph Charger Grey. And this is going to be for all that silver. Like that. And with that done, what we now want to create is a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Wyldwood mix. And we're going to use this to shade all of the white gold. And what we want to do is take a small amount of it on a brush. And what we want to do is we basically want to shade the armor trim and also provide a recess shade on all of that white armor, like that. So we just very carefully run this over the top of the trim whilst letting it run letting it run into the recess around all that white armor, like I'm doing there. And you just want to take your time as you do this. But once it's done, it looks fantastic. And with that done, what we now want to do is create another 6-part contrast medium, but this time 1 part Gryph Hound Orange mix. And we want to use that on all of the warm gold. So areas like here on the scabbard that we did before with just the Retributor Armour, as well as areas like the big sigils. Like this. So you just want to go around all these warm gold details and then we'll come back. And with that shading applied, it's now time to add some highlights. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically go in reverse order from where we've just finished all the way back to the beginning to finish off this horse. So the first colour we're going to make is a roughly 2 part Stormhost Silver to 1 part Retributor Armour mix. Same as we did when we initially covered in that white gold trim. And what we want to use this colour for is to highlight all of the gold on the horse. So we want to pick out all the trim once again. What we also want to do is we want to highlight all of that rose gold as well. this. And we just want to go around very carefully, making sure that we keep this on that gold rather than getting it on all that lovely white. And with those gold highlights all applied, as you can see, it looks pretty awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some Stormhost Silver next. And what we want to do first is we just want to cover over this gem on the horse's chest, like that, as well as on this hanging one, like that. We just want to fill those in with Stormhost Silver. I don't think there are any more. No. So what we now want to do is we also want to highlight all of the scale mail with the Stormhost Silver. And with that Stormhost Silver applied, what we now want to do is we're going to take some Lothern Blue and we want to highlight the blue cloth with this colour. We don't want to highlight the tassels with it. We just want to do the blue cloth. And also this trim that you can see in places, it's more apparent on this side, that's not going to be Lothern Blue either. That's going to be white. So we just want to pick out the sharp edges on the cloth with this colour. And next up we want to take some Corax White. We want to use this to paint in all of that trim on the cloth. Like this. You can also use this as an opportunity to just tidy up any mistakes you might have made on the white armour of the rider, as well as any kind of slightly darker splodges than we want on the horse armour, like I've got just up here. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to take some Wraithbone, and we want to do the same thing that we've just done on the blue cloth, but on all that pale cream cloth that we painted right way back near the beginning. It's getting very rainy here, so I do apologise. But what we also want to do is we want to use this Wraithbone to highlight all that Aggaros Dunes hair as well. Like this, across the tail and across the mane. And we also want to colour in his teeth. And the eyes. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to take some Blue Horror. We want to use this to highlight all those tassels. We just want to pick out the sharp edges, so areas like the knots holding them to the, holding them onto the robes or cloth, as well as the strands of the tassels themselves. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to continue with the Wraithbone, and we want to highlight the horse's fur and muscles. So what we want to do is we want to pick out the sharp edges, for example, areas like down here, where the hairs meet the hooves. Whereas on the muscles, what we want to do is we want to pick out the edges. So there on the ankle, and add a little line going around the bottom like that. Similarly again around here, into a small line of this Wraithbone going down the middle of the leg. And next up we want to use some Doombull Brown, and we want to use this to highlight all of that dark leather and all that Cygor Brown that we originally painted in. So we want to use this on all the straps and on his hooves as well. And with that done, what we now want to do is take some Magos Purple, and we want to use this over the top of those gems. Like this. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to paint in the horse's eyes. And the colour that we're going to use for this is Wyldwood, first and foremost. And so what we want to do is we want to get this Wyldwood all over the front part of the eye, like that, just leaving a bit of that Wraithbone shining through in the top corner, like that. So once again, take a little bit of Wyldwood and just about halfway down the eye, just colour in. And then what we want to do is we want to take some black Templar, not very much, that's way too much. And we want to effectively, around about the midway point, effectively colour in over the top of that Wyldwood, like that. And with that done, our horse is now complete. So what we now want to do is we want to work on the rider. And the place we're going to start is with the bridle and with the saddle, or the reins I should call them. Now the colour that we're going to be using is Wyldwood. And what we want to do is we want to take some of this on our brush and we want to get a good coat of this all over these rope reins, like this, just being really careful around all those details we've already painted in. But what we also want to do is we want to use this Wyldwood to colour in the soft part of the saddle. So we want to colour in like this the saddle blanket. We don't want to get this on the white of the frame of the saddle, you see? So we just want to go around like this. Just be really careful. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to use some black Templar. And we're going to use this for the backs of the legs. That are kind of like the wraps for the armour. And it kind of stops just below the back of the knee. So we don't want to do this all the way up onto the trousers. We just want to do this on this little section here. And with that black Templar applied, what we're now going to do is we're actually going to start with the white gold edging rather than doing the clothes. So this way, that when we shade all of those soft clothes, like the trousers and the shirt, we can actually also do the white gold around all the armour trim at the same time, making it just a little bit easier on ourselves as we go. So what we're doing is we're going to create our roughly 2-part Stormhost Silver to 1-part Retributor Armour mix. And we're going to grab some of this on our brush, and we're just going to start painting this over all of the edges and all of that ornate trim around all the armour. And with all of that white gold applied, what we are now going to do is going to create a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Wyldwood mix. And we're going to use this in 2 ways. As I've mentioned before, we're going to use this firstly to colour in all of his clothes. So we just want to use a sparing amount like this to kind of stain the clothes the same colour as that really kind of pale brown fabric we've got on the horse. Like this. We want to do this across his arms and his legs. So down here. And just working it round. Too much paint. Like that. See that leg and that arm done? And then also what we want to do is we want to take a small amount of this on our brush, and then over the top of all that armour trim, much like we did with the horse, we want to apply this as a shade and a recess shade on all of that white armour. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to use some Cygor Brown, and this is going to be for all of his leather details. So areas like this little strap just here, going across the scabbard. We want to do the wrap on the back of his, well, on his back. We want to do his gloves, and we want to do the straps on his back up the top there. So we just want to go around with this Cygor Brown, picking these areas out like this. With all that Cygor Brown applied to all that leather, what we're going to do is we're going to create a roughly 2 parts contrast medium to 2 parts Gore Grunta Fur to 1 part Cygor Brown mix. So 2, 2, 1. And we're going to use this on all of the wooden, the dark wooden areas. So we want to use this on areas like the haft of the spear, and we want to use this on the scabbard for the sword. Like this. Just using some those big broad brush strokes to get a nice smooth finish on it. And next up, with all that wood coloured in, we're now going to use some thinned down iron hand steel. And this is going to be for all of the silver bits. So areas like the scale mail, there's blades. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to use some thinned down Retributor Armour on its own. No fuss, no muss. And we want to use this to colour in all of the warm gold details. So areas like this decorative area on the haft of the spear and on the hilt of the sword. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to paint in all of the blue details. And so the colour that we're going to be using is much like when we did the cloth on the horse, is we're going to be using some Space Wolves Grey. Now we want to do this on all of the cloth and the hair of his headdress, but we don't want to do this on, like, for example, this little tassel just here on the sword on his scabbard. So we just want to get a good coat of this Space Wolves Grey all over areas like this trailing bit of fabric here. And because of the way this one's designed, you kind of want to take a 360 view of it, just to make sure that you've got all of it. So you can see I haven't covered in this top part here. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to use some Akhelian Green. And we're going to use this to cover in the tassels. So first and foremost, we're just going to grab some Akhelian Green straight out of the pot. We're going to get this all over the large tassel here on the spear. Like this. Just make sure that we finish off that detail before moving on. Like that. We also want to use it to colour in the tassel here on the sword. And what we also want to do is we want to use this Akhelian Green as an all-over coat on the large kind of, on the blue cloth, or what will be the blue cloth, I should say. Now that, we want to do the same thing on this little one here. However, what we want to do on the hair is we want to leave this area, so his ponytail. But what we want to do is we want to take a small amount of Akhelian Green and we want to paint this over in lines, going over anywhere that there's a gem, like that. So you get that kind of alternating scheme that you can see on the box art. Between the dark blue and the light blue. And then similarly on the main horse's, on his main headdress, I'm going to do the same thing again, starting here, because this then becomes the pale blue. Let me just equidistant areas. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to use some Ultramarines Blue. Now we're going to use this in two different ways. One, on the hair, what we want to do is we effectively just want to add a little bit of shading in the recesses, like this. And don't worry if it's a little bit uneven, or if you get some on the raised bit. We are going to do a little bit of a highlight on there, so it doesn't matter too much. However, what we want to do on areas such as this cloth is we basically want to run this Ultramarines Blue across the flat of the banner, like this. With that done, we've just got a few more base coats to do before we do all the final shades and all the final highlights. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to use some Volupus Pink. And we want to use this for the soft grips on both of his swords. I'm going to do it here. And we want to do it the one he's holding. And with that done, we're now going to use some Darkoath Flesh. And this is going to be for his skin. Now we'll just be very careful around here, so as we don't get Darkoath Flesh over all that lovely gold that's already shaded. Just want to use a small amount at a time, like this. And the reason we're using Darkoath Flesh rather than Guilliman Flesh is because we want a little bit more shade in there than Guilliman Flesh gives us over such a small amount of skin. With that Darkoath Flesh applied, it's now time to do some shades and some highlights across the miniature. So we're going to go way back in time now. I'm going to use that Gryph Charger Grey, much like we did on the horse. We're going to use this on all of the silver. That done, we now want to make our roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Gryph Hound orange mix. We want to use this on all the warm gold. So areas like that horse head that we originally painted in with just Retributor Armour. And the sword hilt. And the spear hilt. And with that done, it's now time to do some highlights. So what we're going to do is going to once again make our 2 part Stormhost Silver to 1 part Retributor Armour mix. And we're going to use this to highlight all of the gold. So we want to do all of that armour trim that we originally did with the same mix and then shaded with the Wyldwood. But we also want to highlight all of that warm gold that we've just shaded. And with that done, we're now going to use some Stormhost Silver. And this is going to be to highlight all of the silver details. So areas like those sword blades and the scale mail. But what we also want to do is we want to use this Stormhost Silver over the top of any like gem areas. So we've got one here on the front of his helmet. So just want to colour that in. And with that done, we're now going to take some Wraithbone. I'm going to use this to highlight all of his clothes. Like that. And with that Wraithbone applied, what we're now going to do is we're going to take some Lothern Blue. I'm going to use this to highlight the dark blue cloth that we've got down the back here. I just want to pick out all of those edges, like this one going across and up here. And we want to pick out the edge that we left that Akhelian Green shining through on. We also want to highlight the hair, but we want to highlight the dark areas of the hair with this colour. And with that Lothern Blue applied, what we're now going to do is we're going to use some Blue Horror. I'm going to use this to highlight the tassels, and we just want to pick out kind of the ends like this. We also want to highlight that Space Wolves grey hair with this now, like this. And we also want to just pick out the sharpest edges on that cloth that we've just highlighted with the Lothern Blue, like that, just as a little spot highlight. And with all of that done, what we now want to do is we want to use a small amount of Flayed One Flesh, and we just want to add a couple of highlights to his skin. So we want to just do a little bit there on the tip of his nose. Just want to pick out his lips, like that. And we also want to pick out, if we can, his bottom eyelid on both sides. And with that done, we want to use a small amount of Wraithbone. This is going to be to paint in the whites of his eyes, like that. And like that. If you really want to, you can try and just do a little bit of a dot in there for his teeth. And with that Wraithbone applied, what we want to do is we want to take a really small amount of Leviadon Blue, not very much at all. And we just want to use this to paint in the pupil of his eye by putting a little bit of a dot of this Leviadon Blue right in the middle of the eye, like that. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to take a small amount of Magos Purple, and we want to use this to colour in over the top of any of those gems that we painted with the Stormhost Silver. So we've got the one here on his head. We're not using loads of Magos Purple because we just want to kind of give it a pinky tone but still retain all that shine. And with that done, as you can see, what I've done is I've fixed the shield to his arm. And, well, the colours that we've used, you've seen me do it twice already with the horse, so don't worry. The colours that we used are the white gold, 6 parts, so the Retributor Armour plus Stormhost Silver mix for the gold, then washed with the 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Wyldwood, and then highlighted once again with that same Retributor Armour Stormhost Silver mix. The silver is Iron Hand Steel with Gryph Charger Grey, and then a Stormhost Silver highlight. And then the inside, the wrapping on the shield, is that same mix that we used for the wood on the scabbard and on the spear. So all that is left to do, just to finish him off, is to paint in that sigil on the shield. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint that blue, and the colour that we're going to use is Leviadon Blue. Now, I don't want to use loads of Leviadon Blue because we want lots and lots of control here. And we want to just get this all over the top of that shield. What we also want to do is just want to do a little bit of a recessed shade around it, not very much. So you just want to take your time here. If you do get too much Leviadon Blue on that white of the shield, just use a little bit of Corax White to neaten it back up. When I was recapping colours, I forgot to, of course, mention that the flat of the shield is the same as the rest of his armour. And he's in fact base coated with Corax White. Hence why you could correct it with Corax White. And once that Leviadon Blue is dry on the shield, what we want to do is we're going to use some Lothern Blue. I'm going to just use this to highlight all of the edges on that shield emblem. Like this. This is a little bit fiddly. You just want to take your time here. And with that Lothern Blue applied, has a highlight to the sigil on that shield, well, our Vanari Dawnrider is now finished. And I think it looks spectacular. I'm getting such urges to do like, I don't know, 30 of them. Just as this awesome, heavily armoured horse line. Oh, God, it's beautiful. Anyway, what we're going to do now is we're just going to finish off the base. And there's not a whole lot to do on the base. But the first colour we're going to use is Wyldwood. And this is going to be for all of that soil. Just there. Just take a bit of care around that grass. We don't want to get this Wyldwood on there. It doesn't matter too much if you get it in the wide open space on the base. Because, well, we're going to cover over that with some Stirland Battlemire. And once that's done, we want to take some Militarum Green and we want to use that on the grass. And once that Militarum Green is applied, what we're going to do is we're going to use some Stirland Battlemire with our texture spreader just to colour in all of that negative space around the detail and around the horse. You just want to go right up to where we've added that Wyldwood. And once that Stirland Battlemire is dry, what we're going to do is we're going to give all of that base a dry brush of Tyrant Skull. We want to get this all over that Wyldwood that we did, all over the Stirland Battlemire. But when it comes to the grass, we just want to do a light dry brush on the top part. Don't want to cover the whole thing. And with that Tyrant Skull applied, I've added some tufts to the base, as you can see. So all that's left to do is to finish him off by painting in the rim of the base. And I'm going to be using some thin down Steel Legion Drab to do this. But you, of course, could do this in any way that you see fit. And with the horse and rider complete, this Vanari Dawnrider is finished, and they're stunning to look at. Honestly, I think I've said this every Lumineth video, but I'm blown away by all of it. That's all I've got to say, really. Yeah, I really enjoyed painting this one. I look forward to doing the rest of the unit and potentially doing some of my own crazy ideas for having basically the ride of the Rohirrim, but Ymetrican. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me further, like these legends on the screen, you can do so. Head to patreon.com/Warhipster or head to ko-fi.com/Warhipster. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Do all of that good stuff. And if you want to be kept up to date, make sure to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.